The episode starts with a scarlet residue from prior capital punishment staining a nearby white blossom, creating a striking contrast. Gabimaru assumes the pose of execution, prepared to meet his ultimate fate. The executioner draws his blade back and strikes with a few blows, but to everyone's surprise, the sword shatters upon contact, bewildering the officials. With a composed expression, Gabimaru lifts his head, questioning why he cannot succumb to death. He feels little attachment to life, evident in the numerous lives he has taken thus far. Although he does not anticipate a lengthy lifespan, the botched execution leaves him puzzled. He is returned to his cell, where Sajiri chronicles his biography. According to her findings, Gabimaru was born in the shinobi village of Iwabakure and learned assassination techniques at a young age. Despite many perishing during the harsh training, those who survived developed superhuman bodies. She understands that breaking a blade on his flesh is child's play for someone of his caliber. Gabimaru agrees that someone with such poor swordsmanship as the executioner couldn't harm him. He reveals that he didn't even need to use ninjutsu to defend himself. Sajiri expresses her curiosity in seeing some of his techniques, but Gabimaru politely declines to show her. The next day, the Lord orders an unconventional punishment for Gabimaru, burning him at the stake, a punishment typically reserved for the crime of arson. They construct an intricate platform and surround Gabimaru with dry hay. As one of the guards is ordered to pierce him to hasten his death, Gabimaru's spirit remains unbroken, and the spear shatters upon impact, leaving not a single scratch. The shinobi apologizes for causing damage to the weapon. They light the fire, and the flames quickly engulf Gabimaru. However, after a brief moment, his eyes are still visible through the roaring fire. Frustrated, the Lord orders Gabimaru to be sent back to his cell without providing him with fresh clothes. Sajiri returns to question him again, but she avoids looking at him due to his current condition. Gabimaru reassures her that he isn't trying to resist his fate and that he would welcome death. As the conversation continues, Gabimaru opens up about his past and reveals that he is unaware of who his parents are. All he knows is that they perished at the hands of the village chief when he was just an infant. Although he doesn't know why they were killed, he doesn't have any emotional attachment to the event. As a shinobi, he has no dreams or goals beyond his job. When Sajiri inquires about the circumstances that led to his capture, Gabimaru admits that he had attempted to leave the village. However, he was betrayed by his fellow shinobi during a mission and subsequently detained. He believes that the village chief ordered his capture since leaving the village is strictly prohibited. Despite her curiosity, Gabimaru refuses to disclose why he wanted to leave the village. The following day, the Lord orders him to be stretched by bulls in an attempt to break him. Two powerful bulls are tethered to his legs, but to everyone's surprise, Gabimaru effortlessly pulls them back with a simple leg tug, leaving them exhausted. The Lord realizes that his methods are ineffective and orders for more bulls to be brought in. Sajiri observes that although Gabimaru claims he wants to die, he appears to be resisting his fate. Sajiri inquires about Gabimaru's reasons for attempting to leave the village, despite the Lord's eagerness to simply execute him. Gabimaru explains that he was the most skilled shinobi in the village and had gained the chief's recognition, even marrying his daughter. However, he found his wife to be naive and sheltered, causing him frustration and eventually leading him to leave the village. Later that night, Sajiri is warned by an observer to stay away from Gabimaru, who has earned the moniker Gabimaru the Hollow for his emotionless and ruthless killing spree that resulted in the deaths of 20 men before his capture. There is a rumor that the ninjas of Wabekure village consume an elixir of immortality from Shinsenkyo, but Gabimaru apologizes for sharing too much information. Despite his reputation, Sajiri wonders why a hollow man would fight back so fiercely against his death sentence. Meanwhile, Gabimaru contemplates Sajiri's observation and decides to put an end to his life the following day. As the time for his execution arrives, Gabimaru emerges from the boiling oil seemingly unscathed. The guards standing nearby are engulfed in flames as he walks back to his cell, wondering why he hasn't died. In his mind, he believes he should have no lingering attachments that tie him to this world. The Lord is now terrified and demands to know why Gabimaru won't die so they can all be free from this nightmare. With his latest act of survival, Sajiri closes her book and informs the Lord that the arrangements have been made, and she is ready to proceed with the next phase of the punishment. Gabimaru is chained and led to another area, wondering what kind of torment they will subject him to this time. The Lord is smugly confident that this punishment will finally break the shinobi. The doors open, and to Gabimaru's shock, he sees Sajiri sitting before him. The Lord reveals that she is not a mirror inspector but a sword tester sent from Ito, an executioner from the famous Yamada clan, known for their mastery of the sword and their ability to end things with a single blow. Gabimaru is surprised that the Yamada clan has a female tester, but he stands there in shock as she informs him that the shogun has charged her with his execution. Sajiri reminds him that he wanted someone to end his life and that she can fulfill that wish. He envisions her decapitating him, and the shinobi immediately grabs his neck, realizing that she is indeed the real deal. Gabimaru had always felt that his nickname, the Ugly, suited him well. He had grown accustomed to the terrible and the ugly things in life, and it seemed fitting that his name reflected that. One day, his wife hugged him, revealing her face for the first time. She was scared that he would reject her, but to her surprise, he wasn't repulsed by it. Instead, he called her beautiful and kind, and it was then that she knew he was truly special. In a world where men were expected to become shinobi and women were relegated to bearing children, Gamara's wife believed that people's dreams didn't have to die so easily. She kissed her husband, and from the way he blushed, she knew that he couldn't be hollow. Flashing back to the present, he continued his assault, proudly claiming his hollow label. After years of serving as an assassin, Gabimaru decided to retire and live a quiet life with his wife. He went to the chief to ask for permission, but instead of granting it, the chief had him captured. In a moment of desperation, Sajiri came to his aid, pausing the chief in place with a powerful scroll. To their surprise, it turned out to be an official pardon, dismissing all charges against Gabimaru and granting him the shogun's protection. However, there was one condition: he must venture to the underworld. At first, Gabimaru was confused by Sajiri's statement. She explained that there was a land called Shinsenkyo, filled with fertility and joy where there was no pain. People had called it paradise, heaven, and other names for centuries, but it had only recently been discovered by a few travelers. According to reports, the land was full of dancing flowers and beautiful singing voices, and it was said that the immortality-granting elixir of life could be found there. The shogunate sent a search party to acquire the elixir, but only a lone boat returned with beautiful flowers. Upon closer inspection, they discovered that there were remains inside, and the body had a look of joy on its face as flowers grew from its eyes. The authorities sent 5 more expeditions, but none returned. Gabimaru was skeptical of the story, thinking it sounded like a fairy tale. However, Sajiri assured him that it was true. They had seen humans become flowers, and the shogun had concluded that the legends were real. If that was the case, then the elixir of life must be in Shinsenkyo after all. The shogun had issued a new decree: gather the most heinous criminals, those condemned to death, for the next expedition to acquire the elixir of life from the mystical land of Shinsenkyo. Whoever succeeds will be granted a pardon. Sajiri was tasked with finding suitable candidates, someone with both skill and a fierce will to live. She had heard that Gabimaru's wife still resided in Iwagakure, closed off and uncommunicative since his capture. Sajiri believed that Gabimaru's wife must still hold hope for his return, and so she asked Gabimaru again if he had any attachment to life. Gabimaru realized that this was his second chance and shed a tear. The Lord, however, refused to release Gabimaru and ordered his men to attack. Gabimaru remembered that Sajiri wanted to see ninjutsu and released a fire-style technique that defeated all the guards in an instant. Sajiri put the Lord in his place, and Gabimaru agreed to take the deal, despite his complaints about having to go to Edo to make it official. As a shinobi, Gabimaru was eager to take on the challenge of acquiring the elixir and earning his freedom. He was determined to overcome all obstacles and make it back alive for his wife. Now the story continues with Sajiri reminiscing about a moment when she bore witness to her father's masterful execution of a specific form of capital punishment. The perpetrator was left completely unaware of what had occurred, their story cut short before departing this world. The act was executed flawlessly, devoid of any indication of emotion or pain. Following that fateful day, Sajiri made it her life's ambition to replicate the very stroke her father had so expertly delivered. Upon reaching the age of maturity, she took up the mantle and performed the act with precision. However, a lingering fear plagued her, and disturbing visions of those she had dispatched lingered in her mind's eye. Her seniors noticed the hesitation in her blade and pointed out the doubt and trepidation she displayed. As she gazes into its reflection, she feels an overwhelming sensation wash over her. She covers Gabimaru's face with a cloth. Upon arriving at the capital, the group of criminals is gathered on a beach where they receive a formal welcome and are then informed that they are in the presence of the shogun. It's a rare occasion for these offenders, as they would never have the opportunity to have an audience with the ruler under normal circumstances, hence the need to cover their faces. The news doesn't sit well with the group, as they become increasingly agitated and vocalize their lack of reverence for the shogun. One of the officials overseeing the gathering becomes worried about the safety of having such a volatile bunch gathered together while they continue to make noise. Meanwhile, Sajiri peruses the information of some of the offenders, only to find that their crimes are so heinous that they defy reason. Her thoughts are interrupted when Gabimaru complains of difficulty breathing and expresses a desire to meet the ruler in person. One of the officials produces secret orders instructing them to travel to Shinsenkyo and retrieve the elixir of life, promising a full pardon to the one who completes the mission. Upon learning that their freedom is within reach, the atmosphere changes drastically. The criminals are excited at the prospect of being pardoned and regaining their liberty. One of the offenders, however, lets out a maniacal laugh, revealing his intention to use his freedom to continue his wicked ways. Sajiri ponders whether she can dispatch such a criminal without hesitation, given his sheer stupidity and craziness. Meanwhile, Gabimaru remains nonchalant and yawns, seemingly unfazed by the situation. A fellow prisoner, Yuzuriya, calls out to Gabimaru, acknowledging his reputation in the shinobi community. However, upon meeting him, Yuzuriya expresses disappointment, finding him to be smaller and more pitiful than the rumors suggest. Gabimaru apologizes for not living up to her expectations, and Sajiri observes their interaction with curiosity, wondering if Gabimaru is just like the other criminals or even worse. She scrutinizes him with her blade and is disturbed by what she sees. As the officials describe the island they will be traveling to, the criminals grow rowdy and skeptical, dismissing the details as mere fairy tales. They are then ordered to remove their masks, and a cart is wheeled in. The covering cloth is removed to reveal a man with flowers growing out of his body. The convicts murmur among themselves as it is explained that this man is the only survivor of a recent expedition. As they listen to the official's speech, the convicts began to feel uneasy. The man before them, the only survivor of a recent expedition, had become something other than human, and 60 others were still missing. Some of them started to question whether they should really go to this island, which seemed to be far more dangerous than they had been led to believe. One of the officials tried to reassure them, saying that if they turned into flowers, it would be a mystical blessing. But this only made the convicts angrier, feeling as though they were being mocked. Some even began to express their reluctance to go on this mission. The official shouted at them to be quiet, reminding them that they were all sentenced to death and that the shogun had allowed them to travel to paradise. But Kaien pointed out that they knew nothing about this island or whether the elixir they were seeking was even there. The official told them that anyone who wasn't happy with what was being offered could drop out, and one convict took him up on the offer. But before he could leave, Izen struck him down. The Yamada clan would accompany them as their monitors, and the official warned them not to try anything funny or they would end up like the dead convict on the floor. If their assigned monitor died, they would have to face the same fate. Despite all of this, Gabimaru remained calm, and Sajiri wondered if he was brave or simply didn't understand the gravity of the situation. The shogun whispered something to the official, who then announced that their numbers needed to be reduced due to limited capacity on the ship and the number of monitors. Aza immediately understood what he meant and began to take out prisoners to reduce their numbers. The official didn't intervene and even confirmed that anyone who died in the process would have been useless anyway. They would also keep their hands tied. The convicts wasted no time in turning on each other, their familiarity with violence evident. The shogun watched with excitement at the chaos he had incited, while the official thought it all pointless. The shogun was particularly interested in the ones who possessed rare skills, known as the seals, which bordered on superhuman abilities. They were all on display, taking out opponents with ease, but Gabimaru the Hollow stood out as a living legend. The ruler and his associates were surprised that he had yet to move from his spot, and no one dared to attack him. Aizen noticed Sajiri's discomfort with the extreme violence, and he voiced his opinion that she wasn't suited for the job. This caused her to jolt a little, but she took a deep breath and asserted that she was more than capable. Despite her family's history with death, she had chosen to be involved in the warrior lifestyle from a young age. As some of the convicts saw her as an easy target, she proved them wrong by swiftly taking them out, though the burden of taking lives weighed heavily on her. Gabimaru intervened, reminding everyone that killing was never acceptable and suggesting they find a non-violent solution. The officials remained on guard as he approached the shogun, who listened intently. Gabimaru speaks up, highlighting that while they may all be skilled at killing, not all of them do it by choice. He refuses to be used in this way, but the official takes offense, seeing it as a sign of disrespect towards the shogun. However, Gabimaru is undeterred and adds that it's only natural to avoid ending someone's life if it's not necessary. Despite warnings to watch his tongue, Gabimaru feels frustrated that his words are falling on deaf ears. The officials then point to a random criminal and offer him a place on the expedition if he kills Gabimaru. The shinobi tries to reason with the attacker, but he throws a rock at Gabimaru instead of listening. Gabimaru gives them one last chance to see reason, but they refuse and insist on taking his life. He sighs once more, disappointed that they have chosen death. He warns them that he will end them if they try to attack him. As he walks toward his attackers, his demeanor changes. Sajiri takes note of his statement about burdening himself with their deaths. Gabimaru proceeds to effortlessly take down each of his attackers, as he finishes the last one at the water's edge. The shogun drops his fan in terror at the sight. As Gabimaru flicks the red residue from his hair, the criminals call him a monster. Sajiri notices the souls of those he has taken holding onto him, but Gabimaru remains resolute. Aizen criticizes his brutal methods, to which Gabimaru sarcastically asks if he would prefer it if he made it look pretty instead. This comment triggers an epiphany in Sajiri, who realizes that it's not just about gaining strength or overcoming fear, but also about being able to bear the weight of the lives she has taken. She sheds a tear but quickly wipes it away, while Gabimaru washes off the rest of the mess from his face and body. The officials intervene to stop any further fighting and announce that the remaining criminals with red seals will be joining the expedition, accompanied by monitors from the Yamada clan. The next day, they set off to the uncharted island, with Gabimaru watching as Shensenkyo comes into view through the fog. Gabimaru's mind drifted back to the past. He remembered the moment when the village chief had defied death itself. His shinobi clan had launched a brutal assault on him, their weapons slicing through his flesh. Yet, the chief had merely grinned wickedly as he stood there, seemingly impervious to their attacks. Rumor had it that he had obtained a potent elixir from a distant land across the sea. Sajiri's skeptical expression caught Gabimaru's attention, and he sensed her disbelief in the existence of the elixir of life. With a reassuring smile, he affirmed that the fabled potion was indeed real, though he couldn't say for certain whether it could be found on this particular island. Bound as they were, they trudged through the verdant jungle, surrounded by the breathtaking sights and sounds of this magical place. Sajiri remarked on the surreal nature of their surroundings. As Gabimaru surveyed their surroundings, he found it downright creepy. There was no discernible pattern to the species of plants that grew here, and their habitat seemed completely unnatural. A flash of the survivor's image crossed his mind, reminding him that they couldn't let their guard down in this treacherous terrain. He cautioned Sajiri to stay alert, warning her of the potential dangers that lay ahead. However, as he attempted to free himself from his bonds, Sajiri immediately reprimanded him, insisting that he keep them on. Gabimaru spun around, incredulous at her suggestion that he navigate this perilous place with his hands tied. It was an impossible task, and he couldn't help but wonder if Sajiri had lost her mind. Sajiri made it clear that she was not Gabimaru's ally, but his executioner. His challenges were of no concern to her, and if he refused to cooperate, she would not hesitate to take his head. Gabimaru let out a weary sigh as she tied his hands, reminding himself that he was doing this for the chance to see his beloved wife once again. He was willing to endure any conditions to make that happen. Suddenly, a massive flail struck Gabimaru in the face, sending him hurtling through the air, which shocked Sajiri. The brutal attack had come from Kain, who sneered at Gabimaru for letting his guard down and assumed that he had taken him out for good. However, to his surprise, Gabimaru was still alive, despite the devastating blow. Sajiri asked Gabimaru if he was alright, and he replied that it was only his neck that had been dislocated during the attack. However, he drew her attention to their attacker's state, hoping that she would notice something important. Sajiri, however, misinterpreted him and started giving an exposition on the warrior monk, who had a reputation for stealing weapons from hundreds of warriors he defeated. Gabimaru interrupted her, pointing out that he was trying to draw her attention to his bound hands. Sajiri was momentarily stumped, unsure of what to do next. She decided to consult with Kisho, the senior member of their group, about why Kyuin's hands were not bound. Kisho responded with his characteristic nonchalance, explaining that they could bind Kyuin's hands during the journey back. He didn't want to argue with the prisoner about it, as it was a waste of time. Gabimaru steps forward, coming face to face with Sajiri. Kisho begins to explain that Sajiri is the lowest-ranked executioner due to her unwavering honesty, but before he can continue, Sajiri cuts him off. Meanwhile, the monk grows increasingly impatient with Gabimaru's lack of acknowledgement, slamming his weapon down and excitedly revealing his box of many weapons. However, Gabimaru calmly explains that fighting would be pointless and give the other criminals a head start. Kyuin suggests that given the lack of leads, it may be best to eliminate all the criminals to allow for a thorough search for the elixir. The shinobi happens to be first on his hit list, with an executioner standing by to witness the outcome. Gabimaru is disgruntled at having to end someone again. Nevertheless, he steels himself for the task at hand as Kyuin charges towards him. Meanwhile, Sajiri taps the shinobi's shoulder, still insisting that he bind his own hands while restraining himself. The first strike lands true, but the weapon shatters on impact. Undeterred, Kyuin lunges in with another weapon, only to have it meet the same fate. Gabimaru braces himself as Kyuin charges in with a ball and chain, which shatters on impact. Unfazed, Kyuin tries again with a thrust from his spear. By this time, the shinobi has finished tying himself up, and he expertly parries the attack, using the pole part of the spear as a lever to send Kyuin soaring into the air. As Kyuin falls, his weapons rain down on the ground. Gabimaru kicks one of the spears, which hits Kyuin and sends him crashing to the ground. The shinobi complains about how difficult it is to fight with his hands tied. Sajiri is amazed that Gabimaru ended the fight in just one blow, but everyone is stunned when Kyuin stands up laughing. It's then revealed that his armor is sewn directly onto his skin. Kyuin warns Gabimaru that he's only just getting started. The scene cuts away briefly as Kain exits, but when we return, we see human remains falling on flower petals, revealing the gruesome aftermath of Gabimaru's attack. The monk is suspended in mid-air, impaled by his own weapons. In contrast, Gabimaru stands unscathed and still bound, highlighting the stark difference in their fighting abilities. He remarks that the entire encounter was a waste of time and urges Sajiri to join him in searching for the elixir. She looks at him in disbelief, but he shows his tied hands to prove that he cannot fight. Kishio's sword draws Gabimaru's attention, but he ignores the interruption and instead decapitates his prisoner Kyuin to provide evidence of his defeat. As Kishio bids them farewell and heads back to the ship, the shinobi anticipates a brawl, but Kishio reminds him that they are not foes nor friends, but simply tasked to capture their fugitive prisoner. Sajiri cautions Kishio to be careful on his return, considering the island's missing 60 men. Sajiri Sr. scoffs at her concern for others, grateful for his early exit. Kishio chides her naivety, warning her that just because Gabimaru is restrained does not mean the danger is gone. Kishio divulges the ongoing alliances, seduction attempts, and killings taking place on the island. Aizen's fate is a prime example, met by his ravenous cellmate deep within the forest. Kishio offers to take out Gabimaru for Sajiri's sake, but Gabimaru quickly intervenes, brandishing his sword. Gabimaru warns Kishio not to jest and takes his leave. Kishio predicts that within hours, half of the criminals will perish, and within a day, only one will be left standing. The inevitable deaths of some criminals are already unfolding, with Kishio revealing their expendability and the possibility of replacements. Gabimaru is intrigued when Kishio discloses that the Shogun has contacted Gabimaru's clan, and Sajiri is advised that the outcome of this mission may determine the next head of their clan, and advise her to keep this in mind when dealing with the other executioners. As Kishio takes his leave, he warns her not to let her guard down around criminals. Casting a glance at Gabimaru, he reminds her of his danger despite their uneventful journey for the past few days. Lost in thought, she snaps back to reality as Gabimaru launches an attack on her. She barely manages to block it in time and questions his motives. With a chilling gaze, he confesses that he had hoped to end her painlessly. As Sajiri stares him down, she thinks she has finally figured out his true nature. Meanwhile, Gabimaru reflects on the day his parents wanted to leave the village. The chief warned him that emotions make a person weak and incapable of protecting anything, including precious things. With this in mind, he clashes with Sajiri, who reminds him that attacking her is against the rules. Gabimaru explains that in this situation, everything is about priorities. With the possibility of his clan's men arriving on the island, he must retrieve the elixir before their arrival, or all will be lost. He has no hatred towards Sajiri, but she will hinder his pace if she follows along. Sajiri sees Gabimaru's reasoning and morality as extreme and abnormal, leading her to believe that he should be executed immediately. However, she finds herself hesitating, unbeknownst to Gabimaru, who suffers from the same dilemma. He knows he should have killed her by now, but he too hesitates. He thinks back to an interaction with his wife, who made him realize that it is normal not to want to kill anyone. She pointed out that his heart was beginning to change for the better, and he was losing his ruthlessness, which affected his mission, causing weakness. Flashing back to the current fight, he fails to take the finishing blow when the opportunity arises, attributing it to his weakness, knowing it will not help him survive this ordeal. They continue to clash. Gabimaru reflects on the chief's teachings and becomes cold-hearted again. He breaks Sajiri's blade and strikes with a deadly blow, but she defends herself with her scabbard. He confesses that he doesn't care about the other criminals, but ending her will hurt him, so he requests that she allows him to finish her off quietly. Sajiri doubts that he still has those kinds of emotions. Gabimaru agrees with her doubts and gains the upper hand. However, he struggles to finish her off. The dark apparition of the chief pushes him to be ruthless, but it disappears as the loving image of his wife covers his body. He winces in pain as he admits that he does feel something. Sajiri knows that Gabimaru is only a product of his environment, which is why she hesitates to attack him. She senses a tormented soul like hers, but he endures and tries to hide his emotions. Gabimaru begins to cry as he calls himself weak for not being able to finish her off. She sheathes her sword as she tells him that it's not weakness, but rather the seed of strength. She compares feeling nothing to averting one's gaze and believes that true strength lies in not fleeing from emotions. She knows this because he indirectly taught her to face her demons. As Sajiri stands up, she tells him that she will forgive his wrongdoings. She challenges him to confront his crimes and emotions to reclaim his life. Despite their unchanged relationship, Gabimaru is not the same as before. Meanwhile, Fuchi and Tamiya are surprised to find statues on the island and are awestruck by the mysterious sight. Tamiya gets stung by a butterfly, and upon closer examination, he realizes that the creature has a human face. In a flash of vision, he remembers the flower survivor. Without hesitation, the swordsman cuts his hand and destroys the creature. Fuchi is confused, but Tamiya points out that the butterfly is not from their world due to the human face. As a result, his amputated hand begins to grow flowers, and other bizarre creatures start to emerge. They come across a massive creature with hands coming out of its eyes. At the same time, Gabimaru and Sajiri find themselves surrounded, but by a fish-headed creature. Gabimaru studied one of the creatures closely, its head adorned with a string of prayer beads. He wondered if the monster was a living being or something altogether different. As Gabimaru studied the fantastical appearance of the fish-headed monster, his instincts told him that danger lurked around every corner of the treacherous island. Despite his annoyance at the unwanted hassle, he couldn't help but feel on edge. Suddenly, the monster broke its prayer beads and launched an attack, its multiple arms lashing out at Gabimaru. But the skilled shinobi was too quick, effortlessly dodging the creature's blows and retaliating with a fierce kick that split its head open. Even in the midst of battle, he had confirmed that the creature was indeed alive, a fact that intrigued him. Remembering his shinobi training, Gabimaru considered his options. Their fifth code dictated that one should never engage with an unknown enemy, and he wondered if it was wise to retreat. His attention was momentarily drawn to Ser. who was struggling with butterflies, but his thoughts were quickly interrupted as the monster seized him with its tentacles, squeezing until it drew blood before flinging him into the forest, leaving him lying on the ground. Sajiri rushed over to check on Gabimaru, her concern mounting as she saw his bloodied hand. The danger of the island was becoming increasingly clear, but what surprised her more was that the monster had managed to injure the skilled shinobi so badly. They quickly agreed to retreat, but their plans were cut short as they found themselves surrounded by a horde of towering monsters, all bearing down on them with menacing grins. As the creatures closed in, Sajiri struggled to remain calm and focused, while Gabimaru gave in to his primal instincts. His eyes gleamed with a terrifying clarity as he unleashed a barrage of fire attacks, taking out his first target with devastating precision. The shinobi's rage intensified as he continued to massacre the monsters with a brutal efficiency that left Sajiri stunned and numb. She realized with horror just how dire the situation had become when she felt a presence looming behind her, charging up for an attack. Sajiri manages to evade the attacking centipede-like monsters, but they try to restrain her as the creature prepares for another assault. Gabimaru, out of the corner of his eye, notices this, but his instincts compel him to focus on the enemies in front of him. He ultimately decides to save Sajiri, slicing off the monster's hand before it can harm her. As he regains consciousness, holding on to Sajiri, the fish-head creature attempts to attack them again, but is intercepted and dispatched by Genji. Yuzuria expresses admiration for Gabimaru's ability to single-handedly vanquish all the monsters. She introduces herself as a fellow ninja. Gabimaru is initially angry about their interference in his battle, but remembers his wife's advice to express gratitude to those who help him. Thus, he thanks Yuzuria and her team for their assistance, but also seeks to understand their motives for helping them. Yuzuria moves closer to Gabimaru and advises him to relax, as the monsters have been dealt with. She commends his dependability and courage, especially as she observes him saving Sajiri. As she watches Gabimaru stand tall despite his heavy wounds, Yuzuria is impressed with his tenacity. She attempts to entice him to join forces, citing her fear of the perilous surroundings. However, Gabimaru is no easy target for seduction. He reveals his familiarity with Kunoichi's seduction techniques, causing Yuzuria to retreat knowing that she has failed. Nevertheless, Yuzuria emphasizes her seriousness about working together, as safety in numbers is paramount. Interrupting their conversation, Sajiri inquires about Yuzuria's two executioners. Genji explains that he was previously assigned to Makia but was tricked and ultimately ended up with Yuzuria. He felt that one executioner would not be enough to manage her, hence the addition of a second. Gabimaru and Sajiri are skeptical of Genji's explanation and quickly deduce that he was also seduced by Yuzuria's charm. Sajiri remarks that Genji's weakness has always been women, and that's why he fell for Yuzuria's tricks. Senta takes advantage of the lull in the conversation to introduce himself, but Yuzuria cuts him off and moves on to the next order of business. She shares that they also encountered abnormal insects, monsters, and statues on their way due to the dangerous nature of the place they were in. While finding the elixir quickly is important, there's no point in recklessly charging forward without a plan. Gabimaru is surprised that Yuzuria wants to work with him, given that she called him disappointing before they even landed on the island. However, she tries to play it off as if she doesn't remember making those comments. Sajiri reassures Gabimaru that she's fine with them working together, but Yuzuria's excitement gets the better of her and she tries to hug him. Gabimaru quickly apprehends her and tells her that he never agreed to work with her, as he believes that Kunoichi can't be trusted. Hearing him mention trust makes Yuzuria laugh, and she performs a maneuver that brings Gabimaru closer to her. With a sly smile, Yuzuria tells Gabimaru that trust is not necessary between them, they can betray each other at any time. However, she points out that since only one of them will be granted a pardon, it's best to use each other's skills to find the elixir as quickly as possible. Gabimaru is cautious, so when Yuzuria tries to play the damsel in distress, he instructs her to stop the act and explain how working together would benefit him. Yuzuria reveals that she has valuable information about the island's dangers and wants to trade it for Gabimaru's strength. Senta brings out some books to show Gabimaru the kind of information they have, and one piece of information catches his attention. The real danger on the island is not the giant monsters, but the butterflies. These creatures are often found hovering around the larger monsters, and their scales contain dangerous hallucinogens and poison. Yuzuria confesses that she used Makia as a test subject to learn about the butterfly's behavior, and also shares that centipedes only eat dead flesh. As Senta shares his knowledge about the religious symbols worn by the monsters, Gabimaru realizes that the island holds many secrets, and working with Yuzuria and Senta may be the key to finding the elixir and earning his freedom. Sajiri, listening closely, realizes that she has not done anything after coming to island. She feels powerless and suddenly collapses. Meanwhile, Toma, a trainee, shows his sword cut to Izan and was asked to perform a last task before getting approval, to which Toma adamantly insists that he is the one who chose the criminal to face. He hurries to Aza's cell and expresses his gratitude for waiting, but the surprise revelation is made that the two are actually brothers. Toma had infiltrated the clan solely to save his beloved sibling. However, Aza complains of being violently disciplined while waiting. Toma informs of a way they can evade the law's pursuit. Back to the present, the brothers find themselves facing a group of peculiar monsters, leaving them stunned. Toma reveals that Aza's exceptional ability to swiftly assess a situation and navigate through it has been the key to their success. Though they were originally from the samurai class, their father's demise plunged them into poverty, and their mother passed away shortly thereafter. They were subsequently attacked by bandits, but with Aza's skills, they managed to join their ranks and he eventually became their leader. The situation on the island is no different. Aza immediately launches an attack on the monsters, but his weapon shatters. The Bandit King advises his younger brother that they should slip past the creatures. However, as they move, Toma's lengthy hair gets tangled up by monster, but Aza chooses not to halt their escape. Nonetheless, Toma manages to free himself and strike back. With a mighty swing of his giant axe, the Bandit King finishes off the monster and expresses his gratitude to his younger brother for holding them off while he retrieved his weapon. He's impressed to see that the creature's weapons are effective against their own kind. Suddenly, one of the monsters throws a staff at the Bandit King's face and shocks them by informing them that murder is a sin. Toma suggests that they might be in hell rather than heaven, which triggers Oza to go on a rampage and annihilate all the monsters. Throughout their struggles, Oza has always been Toma's rock. The brothers then devise a plan to eradicate all the criminals and monsters before they find the elixir, which they intend to drink to become immortal. However, Toma cautions that the people they encounter will also be dangerous, as they've survived the monsters' attacks. Meanwhile, Senta carries an unconscious Sajiri as the group moves forward, bringing the episode to an end. If you enjoyed it, then don't forget to subscribe our channel, aniexplainer.